I took the time last week to go through some of these, but I was going too fast, and this section is too important to speed up over. So I'm going to go through it nice and slow this week, and we may need a third week to get through the material I want to talk about and cover. If so, so be it. This section is called the absolute, foundational, first principle-based truth regarding why all police forces on earth should and must be abolished, not reformed, but done away with and replaced with nothing else. You know, I'm going to ask for another piece of art. Maybe I'll have my graphic artist who has come on board in-house make this for me this week, or maybe even tomorrow. I need a slide of someone with cancer that just had, is a post-op, sitting in a hospital and just had cancer surgery to remove a big chunk of lung cancer that they had in their lungs. And their friend's visiting them and says, so what kind of cancer did you decide on to replace your lung cancer, Jim? That's how asinine and stupid someone sounds when they say, well, we could get rid of the current form of policing that we have, but what are we going to reform it with? What are we going to replace it with? Well, what do you replace lung cancer with when you cut it out of the body? What kind of cancer do you replace lung cancer with when you have surgery to cut lung cancer out of the body because it has spread over the majority of the lungs and only surgery is going to reverse it? You cut that cancer out, what do you replace it with? How asinine of a question is that? What do you replace? What kind of cancer do you replace your existing cancer with? I mean, anybody asking that sounds like a complete fool, and they are. So when people go, well, what are you going to replace the police force with once you get rid of it? We can't completely abolish it and replace it with nothing. So what are you going to replace it with? What kind of cancer are you going to replace that cancer you're reforming or replacing with? That's how dumb you sound. Just like a cancer, which the police are, you don't replace it with anything when you cut it out of an infected body. You get rid of it. You throw it in the trash can where it belongs because it's garbage to begin with, and you say good riddance to bad rubbish. And you don't replace it with anything. You know what the answer, what you replace it is? Correct moral and philosophical understanding. Correct moral and philosophical understanding from an educational point of view. So let's look at these dynamics. There's 5 of these. I should say there's 5 absolute foundational first principle truths regarding why all police forces must be abolished. So in these slides, I've changed it slightly to say these are 5 eternal truths regarding why all police forces should and must be abolished. They are not opinions. They are not perspectives. They are not my perspective. They are the total, complete, absolute, unwavering truth in nature that can only ever be understood or someone cannot understand. Again, the philosopher Kierkegaard once said there are only 2 ways that any member of humanity, any human being is ever fooled. They accept that which is not true, and they refuse to accept that which is true. That's it. It's as simple as that, folks. Everything else is ancillary to that. All problems in the world are caused by the acceptance of untruths that harden into calcified belief systems and the refusal to accept truth. This is why in the Kabbalistic tradition, I've talked about some occult traditions. I think we need refreshers on occult traditions at some point in the future as well. In the Kabbalistic tradition, the true positive Kabbalistic tradition, again, every occult tradition has its polar opposite. There is a light occult tradition and a dark occult tradition. The occult is simply knowledge of how the laws of nature and the human psyche function and operate, and how we are receiving the experience collectively as humanity, as a species, that we are receiving as how our behaviors interoperate with those laws. So the Kabbalistic tradition has a concept of receiving, reception. That's what the word Kabbalah actually means in the ancient Hebrew. The word Kabbalah means to correctly receive. Now, let me say that again. A lot of people don't know this, or they have the translation incorrect. In the ancient Hebrew, the word Kabbalah and as an occult tradition, what the Kabbalah does to actually teach is proper reception, correct reception of natural law. It teaches how natural law actually functions, and it teaches how you get the ego out of the way through work upon yourself to properly receive the teachings of natural law. See, just the teachings being out there into the public, which they certainly are, is not the answer or solution. The problem is most people are completely inadequate and ill-equipped to receive these teachings. This is why the majority of people cannot understand what I have said here or what on earth is happening, and or reject these eternal truths that I am speaking. It is not a matter of perception or opinion. There is one truth regarding this. One objective, eternal truth for all time and places. You either discover it, know it, and apply it in your life and put it into action and get a good result, or you stay ignorant because of your calcified ego, your improper reception of those laws of nature, and those eternal first principle based truths. You don't accept them, and therefore you don't align your behavior to them, and then you get chaotic results in our shared experience of human life. That's how it works, folks. That's the deepest aspect of the occult world is exploded onto you right there in a couple minute segment. And that is exactly what it is. How other people go, oh, that's not what the occult is. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. If you were in something to claim to be the occult, you were in a very low level of it that has you hoodwinked, boy. And you don't know what the real occult secret teachings are. I just gave them to you in a few minutes. Whether you understand them or not my fucking problem. Whether you apply them or not, that's your fucking problem and your karma. There's nothing wrong with my teaching. There's a problem with your reception. Let's get it straight. And nobody's going to tell a psychological adult who knows this deeply and with a high level of precision that I don't know what I'm talking about, and you as a know-nothing, ignorant, ego-driven person with total reception problems in the way do know. You don't know what you're talking about. See, that's the problem again, is that the adepts of these traditions have let the children run the whole house. They've let them run the whole house of earth. They've let them run the whole space of earth. And we got to start refusing to back down and stop giving ground to little psychological infants that are going to destroy the whole fucking world. That's what has to happen. You know, and that's what people unfortunately don't have the courage to do. They won't stand up to these violent infants in the world. Whether they be the dark occultists, the order followers, the sick, twisted cult that they're creating socially. You know, this mass psychosis of the woke world. You know, you ain't woke to a pile of dog shit is what you're woke to. You know? If you're even using the word woke to apply yourself, you're not awakened. You're not really spiritually awakened. You think you have some knowledge under your belt, and you've drank in shallow drafts from the Pierian spring. You haven't drank nearly enough knowledge into yourself from that fount of knowledge. You have a false level of what you know, think you know. And nobody's going to tell me that these ignoramuses know and I don't. You don't know what I know. Like I've said a million times, quite frankly, you would shit yourself if you knew what I know. If it got all put into your head in one shot, you'd faint. Diarrhea would be dripping down your leg and you would go unconscious. You wouldn't be able to process it. You got to take it in chunks over a long period of time, and most people aren't doing it. Most people are completely failing and negligent in that regard. When it comes to application of the trivium, you're not even doing the first part of the trivium, which is gathering the knowledge to yourself. That's the grammar stage, and you're not even doing that. Let alone coming to an accurate understanding and acting rightly upon it. Those two steps aren't even in your vision, let alone actively doing them. So let's go through this one step at a time. And this makes people see you can't put one slide of this out there. You got to put all 5 so that they're taken in context if you're going to put this out there. There's 5 eternal truths regarding why all police forces should and must be abolished. Point number 1, eternally true philosophy. Human beings do not emerge from their mother's wombs as immoral beings. Anybody out there that thinks human nature is either good or bad doesn't understand the nature of the human being as a programmable species. The nature of human beings are that we are a programmable species. That is our nature. Our nature is that we do not think any particular way from our inception of being born, from our conception and birth. It is not that we are any kind of angelic beings that know everything or are always good. Neither one of those things are human nature, and the people who think either one of these things are human nature have their head up their ass. I'm so sick of hearing, well, that's human nature. No, it's not human nature. If you have said that anything other than the fact that human beings are a programmable species is human nature, you are incorrect about what human nature is, and you don't know what human nature actually is. The nature of human beings is known, is discoverable, and is actually known by many people. And it is this: human beings are a programmable species. We can be programmed with good information that will lead to good behavior, or we can be programmed with bad information that will lead to bad behavior. Period. That is the nature of human beings. Immoral behaviors, if we're specifically talking about immoral, wrongful behaviors, meaning behaviors that initiate some form of violence or harm to other sentient beings. Okay, that's what we're talking about there. Immoral behaviors are learned or influenced. They are not in any way nature of a human being. Human beings don't come out of the womb doing wonderfully good things, and they don't come out of the womb doing devilishly bad things. Human beings come out of the womb as a being that is capable of receiving information in many different forms. Their behavior then becomes learned or influenced, in other words, informed through information, and then their behavior will go in a certain direction. That is the eternal truth of human nature. Nothing will ever make that untrue. It is not my opinion or perspective. It's how it actually works in nature. So immoral behaviors are learned or influenced by bad parenting, by wrong teaching, by the acceptance of this bad parenting, this wrong teaching, or the acceptance of unintentional or deliberate misinformation being put out into the world, and pre-existing accepted immoral cultural conditions. So let me slow down on this because it's a lot of words all, put together as a definition. Let's go one step at a time, okay? Immoral behaviors are not innate. They are learned or influenced. They're learned or influenced by bad parenting. This means our parents teach us incorrect information about how behavior should be. And then children pick that up from their parents and then think it's true because they learned it from their parents. It is learned or influenced from just simply wrong teaching from other places in the world other than parenting. This means teachers teach wrong things that are incorrect or immoral and tell people that's the truth. And then they accept it and they run with that behavior. The media teaches wrong teaching. Religions teach wrong teaching. So I'm talking about anything that is untrue and leads to immoral behavior because it is untrue and then it is accepted as truth. That is always going to lead to immoral behavior. As I said last week, one of the only things that does matter is whether you are correct or not. That is not ego. That is truth about how things work in the real world from a true pragmatic point of view. This is why if you are correct about what objective morality is, it will lead to right or correct behaviors, which are moral. That's why the word right and correct ultimately mean the same thing. That's why we use the same language. It's just in a different way. Does the word right mean correct or does it mean moral? When we say right or wrong, are we talking about whether someone was correct or not? Or are we talking about whether their behavior was moral or not? It can mean either one. That's why we call it right or wrong. Right behavior is going to be based upon right information or correct information. Wrong behavior or immoral behavior is going to be based upon wrong or incorrect information. So immoral behavior is also created. It's learned or influenced by unintentional or deliberate misinformation. So this means other people learn these things, and then they're putting it back out there for other people, and they're wrong. Therefore, they're doing an unintentional disservice. They're not doing it deliberately, it's unintentional, but they're incorrect anyway. And then they're teaching that which is incorrect. Or somebody could know what's true and deliberately be putting misinformation out there. That is done through the media and the dark occult. The media and the dark occult are always putting disinformation or misinformation out there to the public. They don't want people to understand the truth and come to a place of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. They want people accepting completely erroneous beliefs. That makes them easier to control. That creates more chaos in the world because people's behavior is going to be based upon that misinformation and misunderstanding. And then therefore they're going to be able to justify their existence as a control mechanism. So the last part of this is that immoral behaviors are learned or influenced by pre-existing yet accepted immoral cultural conditions and beliefs. Now, let me say that again. Pre-existing mean they're already here when you were born. Yet accepted. Pre-existing, meaning they were here long before you were here. They existed before you were born. Yet the culture as a whole, the people as a whole, have accepted these pre-existing beliefs. So you've grown up in a culture that was already practicing these cultural conditions and beliefs and accepted them as true, erroneously. Falsely. So you're in a culture that comprises a false religion already that was like that before you were born. That's what I mean by that part of the sentence. So in essence, if we put this all together, where does immoral behavior come from? Garbage input in the form of information that we receive as a human being from the time we're born until the time we grow into adults, and then moving even through that time period continuously. Garbage input in the form of information results invariably and unwaveringly, as law, 100% of the time, in garbage output in the form of behavior. That is human nature. That's the sentence that describes human nature. I'm so sick of hearing, well, people don't understand this, so that's just human nature. Oh, people want to do things this way, so that's just human nature. You sound like a completely, you sound like somebody that got shot in the brain and lived. You know, okay? You sound like you took a hollow point to the brain and somehow survived, but you ain't working on a full stack. Okay? That's what you sound like. When people talk about human nature and sound like this, you know how much I know you studied about human psychology and studied about deep psychology that they're not even going to teach in psychological schools? You sound like a complete idiotic moron, know-nothing fool that has not taken in one bit of information from day one. And it's sad. It's sad that, you know the old saying, it's better to be silent and allow people to think that you're a complete idiot than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. This is what the people who claim to know what human nature is and say it actually are. You've removed all doubt in your total level of imbecilic belief and your total idiocy. All doubt is removed. You should just keep your mouth closed and stop letting the diarrhea drool from it, because you are embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing yourself about how little you know about what the actual inherent condition of a human being is. You know, and this is the thing. People just err on the side constantly of total ignoramuses when it comes to human nature. This is actual human nature right here in one sentence. When it comes to the nature of a human being, we are programmable beings. Therefore, garbage input in the form of information results invariably and unwaveringly in garbage output in the form of behavior. That is the root level cause of all immoral human behavior. It has nothing to do with human nature. It does indirectly in the discoverable truth that human nature results from that human behavior results from the causal factor of human behavior, of human informational input. Let me say that again. Knowing that human nature is that we are programmable and that garbage input in the form of information causes garbage output in the form of behavior helps us to understand that that's all that human nature is. Human nature is simply that human beings can be programmed with information, informationally. That's all it does. It helps us to get down to that causal level of understanding of why do people behave the way that they behave. This is what I talked about on day one. Everybody wants to look at the symptoms. They want to look at the 3D symptoms. How did this play out? What is this institution doing? What is this political party doing? What does this religion what are they doing in the world? It's irrelevant to the point where you can know where all dumb and immoral behaviors come from and worldviews come from if you understand the causal factors of what drive behavior. The causal factors of what drives behavior is what information got put into the human psyche to create that worldview, belief system, and ultimately drive that behavior. And if you want to solve it, you cannot solve it from the realm of effects. You cannot solve it from the realm of manifestation. It must be solved from the causal level of belief, of mind, of what information went in to form the core incorrect, erroneous beliefs that we are acting upon as a culture and a species. That's the only place the problem can ever be solved from. And I'm telling people that's the core cause, and therefore knowing that is the core solution. But they don't want to hear that. Because why? You know what that involves? That says, you know what? You can't rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic by rearranging, reforming institutions or doing things different in the 3D world. What the world that has to change is the inner world. The mind has to change. The spirit has to change. Then the external world changes, and the idiots out there who don't know themselves, and that's what the word idiot means, one who does not know themselves from the original Greek. It's not just an insult. It's an actual understanding that someone else doesn't know the nature of self. They don't know human nature. Okay? They're an idiot internally. So when you're an idiot and you don't know the self and you don't know the causal factors of what drives human behavior, you're going to be looking at all the symptoms and then reaching and grabbing in the dark for solutions. The solution is changing the operational software or operating system, which is the foundational understanding of how reality functions, a worldview. If you don't change that internal worldview, nothing in the external manifested reality can ever change. It's impossible according to the laws of the universe. Get over it. It just doesn't work that way. It's the equivalent, as I've said many times, of holding your hand over a fire and insisting, I will not be burnt. The flesh will live, it will survive. I will hold this over here for 5 hours and it will not burn, and I will not result with a charred stump. Good luck with that. But that's what you're doing when it comes to belief systems about government, police, what constitutes rights. You will never make the things that you believe about that untrue. You'll never make them true. You'll never make your erroneous beliefs about them true, and you'll never make the truths about them untrue. All you can do is get your ego out of the way and properly receive the truth regarding these first principles. That is what this process is. It's the death of ego to make way for proper reception, which, as I said, is what the word Kabbalah means in the original Hebrew. It means proper reception, how to correctly receive the truth of natural law. And part of that is understanding where does human behavior come from, what drives it truly. The dark occult adepts know this. They know every aspect of it, which is why they can pull the wool over your weak-minded and weak-spirited eyes And that's why they can own you and control you. That's why they're still your masters, and they're forever going to be your masters until you change what's going on in here. It doesn't matter what you attempt to change out there. Totally and utterly irrelevant. The thinking is what has to change first. And that's where all the resistance lies. That's where all the ego resistance lies. Because people are so tied up in the mind and in their current level of beliefs that they would rather die than change their thoughts about what they currently believe. And they would most certainly rather die than admit that they were wrong. And guess what, folks? I've gone through that process to discover this as truth. I thought all the ways that you currently think previously. Everything that I'm saying about how you think that you must change if you are to see the world change, I currently thought. All of those things that I talk about, drooling from the mouth, diarrhea, I was one of you. I thought every one of those false beliefs. I was poisoned with every one of those false beliefs myself. And I repented of them. Through hard self-work. Through sitting in front of a mirror and staring into the mirror, looking at the reflection coming back, hating it and crying about how bad I hated it until I changed it by an act of my will. Until I could stand looking into it and say, I love that being because I said I was wrong and I changed the way I thought because I was the problem. I no longer am contributing to that problem, but a lot of you are. Because you won't go through that dark night of the soul and say that you are wrong. I've already done that past tense. And trust me, I've done it so hard and in depth and intensely that if most people did it all at once, they would have committed suicide already. If they did it to the level I did it. So it's not something to trifle with. There are methodologies to do, and we can go over shadow work methodologies. But guess what? The number one is take a mirror in your home and put a fucking chair in front of it and sit there for hours upon hours looking at yourself and what you currently believe is true. And ask yourself, is it actually true? What has this done to my life and others? What will clinging to this belief continue to do? To my own life and to the world at large. And when I asked myself those questions, I broke down. Week after week after week doing it. That was my shadow work. That's true self-respect. Taking another look at yourself and what you currently believe and think. And you know what? That's the hardest work there is to do. That's harder than even changing somebody else's thoughts. You think influencing somebody else's thoughts is hard. That's even harder. That's why so few want to do it. And then there's other techniques you can employ. You can employ shamanic techniques. You can employ techniques with sacred plant medicines. You can employ techniques with emotional freedom technique, EFT, tapping, working with meridian lines in the body. You know, nutrition is a self-improvement technique. That's inner alchemy physically. There's so many ways we could do whole shows on just techniques. But you know what the most brutal and effective technique is? Putting that chair in front of the damn mirror and sitting there with yourself quietly in a room. Let's see how well you do with that task. There's everybody's homework. I'll bet you most of you get D-minuses at the very best, if not outright Fs. Okay? And we need to do better at that. That's the real work. Don't think that the external work isn't important because I've said that. The internal work has to come first, though. And that's what most people, I'm taking off in this direction. You can go there. What you just said, go there, fine. Good luck with all of that. I'm going this way. You know, that's what 99.9999% of human beings will say. Because that's how much they hate themselves and have deep internal self-loathing issues and no true self-respect. So let's move on to the next point. The conditions explained in the previous slide are unknown and or unaccepted causal factors for immoral human behavior, just as I've said. So I'm just reiterating here formally in the philosophy as a statement that I want people to really just look at this text, read it and understand it deeply. Read it many, many, many times if you have to and understand it. That's why I'm putting no other visual distraction. This is core philosophy from a first principle perspective that needs to be understood regarding police. The conditions that I explained in the previous slide, that garbage input in information results in garbage output in behavior. Okay? They are unknown by the vast majority of the public and or they are unaccepted by the vast majority of the public, but they are the causal factors for immoral human behavior. Now, again, if this is unknown, people remain in a level of ignorance. If it is unaccepted, and it is unaccepted. Look, folks, if you just put that first slide in front of somebody, if you put the first slide about where does immoral behavior come from and explain this is the real causal factor that we should be calling and attributing the human condition to, being programmable. I'm going to tell you at least over 99.5% of human beings will disagree. They refuse to accept it as being true. They will not accept it as being true. Okay? So right there we have a problem in reception. That people think they're correct about what the causal factors of immoral human behavior are. And you know what you'll hear? You'll hear, oh, it's just their genetics. It's just how they were born. They're either born high or low. It's just cultural. It's just this or that. No. It's exactly what I explained. As bad information goes in, bad behavior comes out like a computer. You put garbage programming into source code, the result on the screen you're going to get is going to be garbage and nonsensical. You put great written source code that is correct and has all the correct structure and algorithms in it, you're going to get great results when you input information and process it and get output on the screen. That's how it works. So those causal factors for immoral behavior are either unknown, through whatever means that they are unknown, people are dissuaded from looking into them, they're actually somewhat hidden, okay? Or people just haven't looked into it, or they're unaccepted, meaning people will hear it, will somewhat look into it, and yet they will reject the truth because of their hardened ego. So since most human beings either do not know or refuse to accept the truth regarding human behavior, they erroneously believe that the answer to the problem of immoral behavior is to set up a system of control to ostensibly provide protection. As we said, these systems of control only claim to provide protection, but can never actually provide it in nature. They set up these systems of control to ostensibly provide protection for human beings, such as government, police, military, etc., instead of correct moral education for the young. This is what is missing from all so-called educational systems, which are nothing more than indoctrination systems for the young. We have schools trying to teach people historical events, mathematics, verbal skills, language skills, all of that. But guess what? What good is any of that going to do if you don't know the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior? If you don't know the difference between moral behavior and immoral behavior? If you are not teaching correct objective morality to the young, you're not teaching them anything worth learning. Because without that as a foundation, anything else you teach them is going to be used for an immoral purpose somewhere down the line. This is an inescapably true logical understanding of first principles that can never be logically truly refuted by anyone with sound, logical, reasoning faculties. Only people that are deeply ensconced in an entrenched ego will try to refute this and insist that it is wrong. No, you have the problem with ego in not understanding it. You have the problem in spirit and soul through some form of trauma that you cannot work through and get over for correct reception of truth when it comes to moral principles. That's your problem, not mine. I'm speaking the truth. See, the problem is, Yes, have traumas been done unto us, especially when we were young? Yes, absolutely. Were traumas that were done to you when you were young your fault? Absolutely not. Someone else did that to you, and you were harmed, you were violated through the initiation and impartation of that trauma, whether it be physical, verbal, emotional. But guess what? Regardless of how or who did that to you when you were young, it is your responsibility as an adult to work through those traumatic incidents in your life and come out the other side a true moral adult. That's no one else's responsibility. That's actually no one else's problem but yours as an adult. You have to own that. That is what happened to you. It is not who you are. It was an experience. It is not your identity. I think David Icke did a profound interview with London Real recently, where he talked about get out of this ego identification. This is what I've been re-emphasizing week after week here on What on Earth is Happening. Ego identification will keep you rooted, thinking that you are your experiences, you are your job, you are your culture, you are how much money you make, you are what you have in your bank account. Has absolutely nothing to do with your true identity in consciousness as a spiritual sovereign being, having a human experience in the three-dimensional world of matter. What you go through here in trauma and experience is just that, an experience. And that is not to say we should not strive for a better experience or one that is devoid of violence and coercion. Because the 3D world is very real and it matters. It's not different than the spiritual world. It's one and the same. We should not elevate it or obviate it. Don't elevate the material above the physical and don't think it's insignificant. They are one and the same. We have to have a balanced worldview and perspective about that. Again, that's also what I've been saying here on What on Earth is Happening since day one. So, we need to implement correct moral education for the young and help them through their traumas, because that is our responsibility as an adult, and it's your responsibility to do that for yourself as an adult if you were not given that proper moral education as a child. It's no one else's responsibility but yours. And then it becomes our moral responsibility to do that for our young and take them out of these indoctrination camps called public school systems. Morally educate them properly according to the first principles of natural law, the non-aggression principle and the self-defense principle. So moving on, in the third very important philosophical foundation of the 5 eternal truths regarding why all police forces should and must be abolished and replaced with nothing. All systems of control. Invariably, I have a mistake there. It said invariable instead of invariably. I'll correct that. I apologize. Systems of control invariably attract those who have the internal desire to control and abuse others because of their own psychological imbalances and inadequacies. This invariably creates a system entirely built upon corruption. The very idea of power over others attracts human beings with the absolute worst psychological and behavioral qualities. Such systems of control are inherently immoral by inception, on their foundation, at their roots, because they are built upon the false belief that some people may be granted or delegated rights that others do not possess. This can never be truly done. No one, if you don't have a right to do something as an individual, no one can give you that right. So if you just look at apply the behavior to yourself is the mantra. Here's the other mantra. Apply the behavior to yourself as an individual. Do you have the right as an individual to tax others, regardless of how altruistically you want to spend other people's resources? Do you have the right as an individual to implement a tax upon any other individual? Yes or no? There is a true answer. It's not a matter of opinion. And if you're being honest with yourself and you say that you're a nonviolent person that wants a voluntary interaction between human beings, which is what a moral person wants? The answer is no. You as an individual do not have the right to implement a tax on any other human being. Let's go to an even more foundational core and fundamental core philosophically. Do you own the body of another human being? Can you say that you rightfully own the body of another? Well, the answer to that is no, you're not a rightful master over someone else, and you cannot legitimately, morally make them your slave. Well, what is prohibition in any form or fashion? If I tell someone else they may not put a certain type of substance into their body, I am making indirectly a claim of ownership on their body. And I'm sad and disappointed at how few people in this so-called truth movement don't understand that. You're just fucking wrong if you don't understand that. Your ego is in the way. You're incorrect. You don't have first principles down correctly. No one else can tell anyone else as an individual what substance they may or may not put into their body, no matter how harmful it is to their body, because it's their body. It's their property. My body isn't someone else's property. So if I want to take a hand of psilocybin mushrooms at any given time, I'm going to do it, and no one else is going to control that behavior. And if you try to control it, you're going to be met with a hollow point round in the head. So try to do it and see what happens, boy. You're not going to get very far. At least the first one. First one ain't going to get too far. You might eventually get me, but trust me, I'll take a few before I go. Know it, like you know the sun's coming up tomorrow, son. You don't own my body, boy. You don't tell me what goes into it, boy. That's what prohibition is. Slavery. Prohibition is slavery. Taxation is slavery. You know, that's it. If you don't understand it, you're wrong. You haven't studied it enough. You haven't looked at it from a first principles, foundational point of view. And you're just wrong. And your ego's in the way of correcting that error. So, the very idea of power over others in this way attracts the human beings with the worst psychological and behavioral qualities. These systems of control are immoral by inception because they're built upon the false belief that some people can be granted or delegated rights that others don't possess. You don't have the right as an individual to enact prohibition. You don't have the right as an individual to enact taxation. You don't have the right as an individual to enact licensure. You don't have a right as an individual to violently punish people for doing things that are their rights, and or prevent them from doing things that are their rights, and or insist that they must do things that are based upon coercion and the threat of violence, which is called duress. You don't have the right to hold other people in duress. You don't have the right to do any of the other things that are based upon coercion, violence, duress, and slavery to another individual or group of people. You don't possess those rights. You're not a god. You're not able to receive those rights because those rights don't exist. Therefore, no other individual and no other group of individuals can ever delegate or grant those rights to any other individual or group of individuals. It can never happen in nature. You can only falsely believe through a religious cult belief context that you are allowed under moral law to conduct such behaviors. You are not. That is a false belief. You simply do not understand that you are immoral and wrong. So, any system that is set up to do that is immoral on its philosophical and moral foundations. It does not have the right to do these things. Therefore, the continuation of that institution is also immoral. This means that on its foundation, that institution never had the right to exist from a moral first principles perspective. Policing and government are euphemisms for slavery and never had a moral foundational right to exist. You're wrong if you think they did, ever. And I'll tell you what, a lot of my audience are brain dead in this regard. Not a lot, I'd say some of them are. They're brain dead in this regard. You're still statist. You don't understand the concept of anarchy, of true anarchy, which means no rulership. It does not mean no rules, because natural law is always in effect. Therefore, always moral rules will be in effect regarding behavior. Whether people believe in those rules, accept them or not, that is irrelevant. You can never grant or delegate a right to any individual or group that it does not exist for an individual. And the rights that we say we can delegate for government or police do not exist for individuals. And if you think they do, you're wrong. You're morally wrong, and it's an immoral belief. To even believe that you can do that is impinging upon others' freedoms, because you're saying slavery can be justified and condoned. And that makes you a supporter of slavery. That's an immoral belief on its foundation. So let's move on to the next tenet. An eternally true truth and principle regarding why police must be abolished at all places. Because they are an immoral institution on their foundational face. So point number 4. Those corrupt human beings from these institutions of control eventually believe that they have the quote-unquote right to rule everyone else. And they are willing to use coercion and violence to keep their subjects or slaves, if we're really dropping the euphemisms, in line. Because the belief in so-called authority is so widespread, most people actually believe that this class of corrupt and violent human beings have legitimate moral authority to command the behaviors of other people. Imagine this. We still believe culturally, as a whole, as a species, in kingship, in the divine right of kings. We've just diffused that so-called right to an oligarchical group of individuals calling themselves government. And now they are the new kings or gods of society. They're the new pharaohs, the new kings, the new pharaohs, the new gods on earth. Imagine. This is what people who believe in government and policing actually think. You're immoral trash. You're immoral trash. You're immoral trash. If you think that that is a legitimate system of belief and legitimately moral. You're fucked up in the brain. You're actually immoral. Your parents were probably immoral pieces of dirt that hammered this nonsense into your brain. And you, as a continued immoral piece of dirt, because of how much trash taught you, trash beliefs, turned into a piece of trash. All right? Is that saying it hardcore and in your fucking face enough? And I'll say it right to your face in person. See me when you have the time. All right? I'll tell it to you in person. Because it's true and it's not an attack. And if you tried to attack me physically, you'd see what would happen. All right? And that's not an act of aggression. I'm saying you put your hands on me in aggression. I'm going to defend myself, and I know how. And trust me, it ain't going to be to prove who the better physical contestant is. It won't be about a contestant, a combat, contest physically. You'll find out what my rights are. And I don't care who you are. Most human beings even believe that this corrupt class of human beings should possess a monopoly on the use of physical force, and that everyone else should abdicate their inherent right and responsibility of self-defense to this corrupt class of human beings. Imagine this. You're going to take my right to defend myself away? You're going to take my right to physically defend myself away? Not without bloodshed, motherfucker. Not without bloodshed, motherfucker. You'll find out. And guess what? If it goes down that way in this lifetime, so be it. It goes down that way in this lifetime. Then I'll be right back doing the work again in another lifetime. Or in another place. Wherever I'm called, wherever I'm needed, that's where I'll go. But you know what? You're not going to tell me what my rights of self-defense are. You're not the arbiter of truth, and you're certainly not God. And this is what our European brothers and sisters need to understand. You've been hammered shit into your brain since the day you were born over there in King and Queen land. Shit's been hammered into your brain since the day you popped out of your mother's womb. And you accepted and swallowed it. And this is what I'm talking about. That may not be your doing when you were real young, but it should be your responsibility. It is your responsibility to undo the crap that was hammered into your brain regarding self-defense and regarding firearms. And I hope you're doing it now with what's going on, with the violence that's going on. I really hope some people are understanding that Americans are going to be in a far better position to defend our bodies and our rights and not go into total abject servitude. You guys are going to be kissing your own asses. You better get real flexible and pucker the fuck up. You better get real flexible so that your mouth can touch your anus, and you better pucker up, boys and girls, sons and daughters, because you're going to be kissing your own assholes on the way in the cattle car to the concentration camps. That's what's going to happen to you in Europe. Most of you anyway. Switzerland might have a little harder problem there, I think. Yeah. But the rest of Europe, you guys better start practicing in the mirror, puckering up, and liking the taste. Because I'll tell you what, you're going to have a real hard time with what you allowed. And it ain't going down like that here, boys and girls. It ain't going down like that here. And anybody who thinks it is, you're going to find out. Let's hope it doesn't go that way. That's what everything I've been doing is trying to push it to not go that way. But guess what? If it goes that way, you're going to find out. So this is the fourth tenet. Okay? The corrupt human beings who gravitate to control-based institutions believe they have the right to rule everybody else, and they're willing to use coercion and violence to keep their slaves in line. Unfortunately, this belief in authority is so widespread, people believe that they have this right. And most people even believe they have the right to have a monopoly on the use of force, and that the right of self-defense should be taken away from other people and given only to these corrupt individuals. This is the most asinine, bullheaded way of thinking that anyone can ever accept. It's completely a false cult religious belief. And that's all it ever will be. Now, fifth and arguably most important, which I didn't really have time to get to last week. This builds upon and finishes all the other four tenets of why that are eternal truths about why police must be abolished. For those with an adequate and clear reasoning capacity. This means if your brain isn't hammered shit already, okay? If you have the ability to truly think clearly and you're not ruled by your emotions of like reasoning, of thinking clearly because your emotions are in the way. Hey, you can even make the statement, Mark, your anger gets out of control sometimes. That's letting your emotions rule you. No, really it's not. It's actually justified anger. It's actually rightful indignation at how ignorant and stupid other people are that is affecting the freedom of people who actually do understand freedom and want to be free. That anger is coming from a justified place and position. And I don't just run with it unnecessarily. I let it out cathartically and I let it out creatively through putting this work out. I let it drive me as a source of fuel, knowing what is wrong in the world and then actually doing something to correct it. That's called the sacred gift of anger. And okay, I could hit the gas pedal too hard sometimes on that, but guess what? I'm still using it correctly. Non-justified anger is getting angry at really dumb shit and other people for doing things that don't matter. Oh, you don't like it. Oh, your favorite TV show got preempted this week and I'm mad. My sports team didn't win. I'm really angry about that. You're a little boy and a little girl. You're not getting angry for the right reasons. It's a psychological infancy mindset. So what I'm talking about here is people who have an adequate and clear reasoning capacity in the mind. That they're not under such mind control, they can follow philosophical reasoning and philosophical progressions, meaning they're not reasoning from their emotions, they're actually reasoning from first principles. And this is part of the problem. You can't even have a discussion like this today. No one will, hardly anyone will take it from a first principles perspective. You say the first thing they don't like to hear, and where do they go? Name calling, they go into ad hominem attacks because they can't reason from a first principles perspective. They can only reason from a, my feelings are hurt because you said something I don't agree with. And I'm going to say, I don't give a damn whether your feelings are hurt. I don't care how offended you are. This is the eternal truth. And I could philosophically and morally prove it by explaining progressively in a very stepwise progression, moral first principles, to get you to come to an accurate and logical understanding of why it is so and why this is truth and not conjecture or belief or opinion. See, part of the problem is these people are solipsists. Go back to show number 1. I talked about why solipsism was such a dangerous ideology. Solipsism is Satanism, ultimately. It is the devil. It is utter satanic mindset belief from a deep level satanic perspective. If you think there's no objective truth, if you think there's no objective truth regarding morality, that is a satanic mindset. That means you are saying human beings are the arbiters of truth. It's all subjective, all opinion based. We can make up whatever we want to fucking make up about what right and wrong are, what moral behaviors or immoral behaviors are. And we are the arbiters of that arbitrary decision. That's why it's called arbiter. To be the arbiter or arbitrator of something means you decide it based on your whims, based on your preferences, based on your beliefs. You're not accurately understanding the truth of what is and objectively aligning your perception to that objective externalized truth that exists independently of your own consciousness. If you are dead and gone, that truth still remains. It did not depend upon what you thought about it or your opinion of it or your likes or preferences. That's what it means to be objectively true. Solipsism says everything's an opinion. Nothing is objectively true. Well, why bother looking into anything? If there's no truth, you can believe whatever the hell you want and it magically becomes the way it is. Why would you look into anything, including science, including the physical world, if nothing is true? And this is what people think is true regarding behavior, that there's nothing true regarding it. We can just make it all up. So, for those with adequate, clear reasoning capacity, the understanding of the 4 previous points or slides should result in the inescapable logical conclusion that it would always be infinitely more dangerous and destructive to human life and freedom to be ruled and enslaved by a corrupt and psychopathic class of human beings who almost everyone erroneously believes has the right to do the immoral behaviors that they do on a daily basis, than to possibly find ourselves in a situation where violent and destructive gangs of human beings are causing harm and chaos everywhere. 100% objectively, eternally true statement. Doesn't matter whether you understand it, doesn't matter whether you agree with it. Let's break down what this means. What this statement means is that if you have let's say the only 2 possibilities break down in the world, 2. Violent and destructive gangs are roaming the streets everywhere in all the world, doing harm to others. Okay? Is that more preferable to a situation where a controlling class of human beings enslaves everyone, tells everybody, we're essentially gods and the arbiters of truth. You must obey our arbitrary decrees as our subjects or slaves. Which situation is more preferable? I'm telling you definitively and factually. The scenario where people believe that violent and coercive gangs of people calling themselves the police have the moral right to do the violent and coercive behaviors that they perform on a daily basis is infinitely more dangerous to human life and freedom every single day than roaming gangs of people who don't give a damn about anybody's rights, violently doing harm to people every day on the street, but nobody believes they have the right to do it. See, this is where the perception of a right becomes infinitely more dangerous. This is where the mind makes the scenario infinitely more dangerous. Would you believe a mafia gang has the right to rule over you? Do we believe gangs of criminals on the street that are not the police would have the right to criminally rule over people? Would we believe that they have authority and the rights, even if they claim this is our right to do this? What if the mafia got all together, all the mobs of the world banded together in one mass mafia and said, we have the right to do all the violence that we do as an institution, as a gang? Would people believe them? Most people would say, you're full of shit and we're going to defend ourselves because you're the mafia. But we don't do that when it comes to the police, do we? No. Then all of a sudden we think they have the right to do it, because it's based on government and the concept of authority, which is a religious cult. That's a satanic death cult. It's an infinitely more dangerous satanic death cult than all the mafias of the world coming together into a super mafia and claiming the right to rule over others. Because guess what, folks? That's exactly what happened. That's what government is. That's what policing is. And people don't understand that that's what it is. It's infinitely more dangerous for the police to have that belief of them having the right to do these things, because then other people let them rule unchallenged. So let me read it again and hammer the belief into your thick skull. For those with adequate clear reasoning capability, the understanding of the previous 4 points that we made in this section should result, keyword there being should, you should have the ability to reason out the inescapable logical conclusion that it would always be infinitely more dangerous and destructive to human life and freedom to be ruled and enslaved by a corrupt and psychopathic class of human beings who almost everyone in the world erroneously believes has the quote-unquote right to do the immoral behaviors that they do on a daily basis, than to possibly find ourselves in a situation. This definitely wouldn't result, by the way. This is a possibility if we do away with all policing. And guess what? I guarantee you, if we do find ourselves in this situation I'm going to describe, a lot more people would wake up and say, you don't have the right to do this. And they would wake up to the solution of proper moral education, which I'm going to talk about. Okay? They would wake up to self-defense and the importance of proper moral education of the young. If we found ourselves possibly in the situation where violent and destructive gangs of human beings are causing harm and chaos to people everywhere. Here's the answer to why this is true. At least in the latter situation of gangs of mafia roaming everywhere and doing harm to everybody, no one would erroneously believe that such people would have the quote-unquote right or quote-unquote authority to conduct such immoral behavior. And that the victims of their criminal actions, and also what would happen is the victims of their criminal actions and behaviors they would come to the acceptance that they themselves would have the right to use self-defensive force to stop these gangs of people from continuing to conduct such harm against them. Think about it. If gangs ran society instead of government and police, would anybody believe that the gang has the right to do that violence? If drug gangs do rule parts of Mexico, think about that. The mafias of Mexico rule whole parts of the country. Whole parts of that state are ruled by the drug cartels. Do people believe that the violent drug cartel mafioso criminals have the right to rule over the people? Of course they don't think that they have that authority or right. We're in an infinitely more chaotic and dangerous situation from a perspective of mind and mentality and belief. We're in a cult. A cult is ruling the world that has convinced fucking people that they have the right to rule them. What's more dangerous? A mafia who's just doing violence to people who nobody thinks has the right to rule them? or a fucking satanic death cult that has convinced people over the generations and centuries that they actually have the right to do this violence to them and that they can't challenge them because they're the authorities and they have the right to do this and the other people don't have the right to stop them from doing it. Imagine. No, this is correct. And if you don't think so, you are incorrect. You are wrong. You are immoral for being incorrect and wrong. The end. And do the internal work to get your head right. Nobody can do that but you. I can float the truth out there for you and it can be perfectly explained. And it is. It's perfectly explained. Like no one else will do it. Like no one else will sacrifice the time of their life to do it. I've perfectly explained it. It is you who are in ego. It is you who has a block to the reception of these eternal truths. Work with yourself. Sit in front of a fucking mirror. Do some shadow work. Turn off all other distractions, put your phone in airplane mode and sit in front of a mirror for a couple of hours and ask yourself, what ails me? I've asked it, and I've asked it in more of an even, what's the word when you ask a question you're not really looking for the answer? I've asked it in a rhetorical way, because I can't actually sit and answer that question for everyone. You have to answer it. The question is, what ails you, brother? What ails you, sister? Why are you in the situation mentally and spiritually that you are in? You are broken if you don't understand these eternally true philosophical and moral principles. And you are broken because of internal trauma. You are broken because of trauma of the heart, of the spirit, ultimately. No one can repair that damage but you. You must do the shadow work, that internal work. I can't do it for you. So, these five slides, I feel, with the exception of the couple of little errors I have to correct with grammar or spelling, are probably some of the most important philosophical slides that I have ever made in any of my material on What on Earth is Happening. They have to be deeply understood in context.